Thank you. Senator, thank you for allowing us to go with you on that trip. It was certainly a fascinating experience and an opportunity for me to understand and appreciate why Guantanamo Bay is the only location on Earth for these enemy combatants to stay. Frankly, when you think about the location of Gitmo, it is an isolated location surrounded by water, mountains, and a desert. So this is a location where you want the world's worst terrorists, without any question. Second observation I have is that our men and women consistently are doing fantastic jobs. As the Senator described, the splashing incidents, that over 250 assaults have been made against the guards. Not one single retaliation. And the splashing episode, if you really understand and appreciate what splashing is, you understand how much character and restraint our guards really have. Splashing is basically if you take a water bottle and you fill that water bottle with urine, feces, and vomit, and then you use it as a projectile and splash the guards as they're trying to provide assistance to the inmates. This is deplorable. And frankly, it's amazing, and it speaks, it's a major testament to our military, to their training, to their personal resolve to honor the country as they take care of these prisoners. I think the senators also addressed the fact that the legal proceedings, working the system as it relates to not allowing women guards to participate in their transfers for legal proceedings is incredible, that we as a nation have made such a step forward, and yet we're allowing the enemy combatants to work our legal system that is to the detriment of these women who are willing to serve their country, and is also a detriment to their own promotions. If you think about the fact that they are unable to fulfill their responsibilities, they're unable to do the job that they have volunteered to do, it's amazing and remarkable. And that has a long-term impact on these young women's ability to see the same type of promotions to happen in the same time frame if they're unable to do their jobs. And the one thing I left that room after we spoke with the women was simply this: not only do we want to let us do our jobs, but they were very passionate about the consequences of not being able to do their jobs. Final comment. Gitmo is the only location on Earth to keep these enemy combatants. Our military continues to do amazing work with great respect. We were able to see that the quality of life of the inmates is really good, and frankly, outstanding, especially if you compare it to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. It's quite remarkable that with high integrity, the quality of life being experienced by these enemy combatants was as good as it was. We have a lot to be proud of as Americans. I'll turn it over to Senator Capito.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and I want to particularly thank Senator Ayotte for sponsoring the trip and for inviting me, and Senator Scott, I believe it was your first trip.
Yes.
My first trip as well, and so thank you for that. I have a couple of impressions, many which are similar to my fellow senators, and so I want to briefly just reiterate that the facilities that were created in Guantanamo to detain enemy combatants are, to me, the only place, the best place, and the right place for us to house the remaining 114. For a lot of different reasons that Senator Scott got into, but mostly the impression that we came away with, which is the professionalism, the integrity, the strength of which our military moves forward on this mission. I think it's important for us to remember historically that we've had a naval base at Guantanamo Bay since 1903. This is not a new location, and it is very strategic for us in 1903, as I believe very strategic for us in 2015. And so after we reviewed the detention operations and their future, I just really think that we must continue to detain prisoners there at Guantanamo and prevent those prisoners from touching the shores of the United States. I want to echo, too, both my fellow senators' deep concern about what we see happening with our women military police. They're professionals. They are volunteers. They are, of the four that we met with, three of them really quite young, I think, starting their careers in the military with an eye towards the future. Mm-hmm. And I don't think being a military policeman is some of the easiest duty, quite frankly. And certainly it isn't at Guantanamo when you hear about the incidents of abuse that some of the guards take. But I find it outrageous, like the Joint Chiefs of Staff said today, outrageous that we're letting the 9/11-5 dictate our procedures in our own military. We've had a lot of discussion and debate over the 15 years I've been here on the role of women in the military and expanded roles for women in the military. We've got to respect what we're asking our young men and women to do. And in this case, I feel that they're being disrespected in a certain sense. And I think Tim mentioned, too, the fact of what's their future. If they can't fulfill their entire duty at this duty station, they feel that they're being penalized because of their ability to rise through the ranks. We also have discussed a lot about how do we get more women into the ranks, into the higher ranks of the military to reflect what the military is today. And it's just amazing to me that a military judge would make this judgment in light of how we feel about the equal service of men and women in our military. So with that, I would also like to say I am a member of the Appropriations Committee. I'm on the subcommittee of Military Construction and VA. The Appropriations Subcommittee, we see some of the dedicated funds that have gone to Guantanamo Bay over the years. I think we need to keep our eye on that. I think we learned that there are some deficiencies still remain at Guantanamo, and we feel I feel very strongly that asking our military to serve in difficult situation and be away from their families, serve combatants that obviously don't respect us and basically have destroyed 3,000 lives on these shores, that we need to make sure that they are living, eating, and residing with the quality of life that we have at all of our bases. And that's a work in progress. But I think the leadership that we met there has just been fantastic. And I was really pleased to get to meet with at least one constituent from West Virginia who is very proud to be serving our military in Guantanamo Bay. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions?
Senator,
yes.
Now that the budget deal seems to have addressed the question of the top-line number in the defense authorization bill and some of the administration's concerns, one of the things that they had also complained about was the Guantanamo language. Do you see any changes in that language or anything that's going to be done, or is that pretty well set for what you're going to be sending to the White House?
Well, you know, from having followed the defense authorization at least every year since I've been here, the administration has, even when Democrats were in charge and Republicans in charge, has always complained about the provisions in the defense authorization about Guantanamo. So I think that my take on it is the provisions that we put in this year that did have some additional basically findings that they had to make before they transferred detainees to third-party countries. If you look at it, what we put in place was already what was in place, and so we didn't put anything. In other words, we put back what was in place a couple of years ago, and so I think that they're very reasonable findings, especially as we look at the remaining 114 and the records, I mean, of the individuals that are left there and what we know about them. And so I would hope that Guantanamo doesn't become a barrier, given that there's the bill that was passed by overwhelming votes in the Senate and very large vote margin in the House really reflects, I think, what the viewpoint is here on Guantanamo.
You all alluded to the fact that you don't want to see any transfers to the United States. Can you talk specifically about your thoughts on the recent visits to the Colorado facilities?
Well, first of all, I have firmly, since I've been here, I don't support transferring the Guantanamo detainees to the United States because we have a top-rate detention facility there that is off our shores. And one question that I asked a while ago of General Kelly, which is a question that's never been answered for me satisfactorily, is the people that want to close Guantanamo and move these individuals, terrorists, to the United States, one of the reasons they cite is, oh, this has been a symbol for terrorism around the world. But a question that's never been answered for me and couldn't be answered when I asked one of our top military leaders was, well, if we put them in Colorado or we put them in some other state, will that then become a target and a symbol of terrorism on our shore? And that's never been, in my view, sufficiently answered. And I think the American people deserve, when we already have a facility, to not have those individuals transferred to the United States. In terms of the Colorado position, again, I firmly believe that they should not be transferred to the United States, whether it's in Colorado or some other state. And we'll see what the administration puts forward on the plan. But as I understand it, certainly you should ask the senators from Colorado where they stand on this particular issue of having these individuals in our state. But I would oppose transferring them anywhere in the United States of America when we have such a top-rate detention facility that, having just been there, you can see they're treated well, and the people who serve there do so with great distinction, and they treat, even when the guards are, again, mistreated, they have not retaliated. And I think that's a testament to the facility we have there and the professionalism of our men and women in uniform.
And there's no doubt that one of the locations that the DOD has already visited was Hanahan, South Carolina, the Hanahan Brig. And without question, when you think about the proximity of the brig to a school, elementary school, a middle school, and a high school, as a crow flies, less than 2 miles away. You think about the impact on rail and our port, as well as our airport, less than 4 miles away as the crow flies. So the reality of it is, if you're talking about putting more American lives in danger and peril, then consider a location that is domestic. The fact is that we built a world-class, one-of-a-kind facility in a remote location, hundreds of miles away, surrounded mostly by water, deserts, and mountains, for a reason, to keep them isolated. There is no location domestically that could provide the same type of isolation, and frankly, to replicate a one-of-a-kind location and facility, again, to spend that amount of money again to do so just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
And one thing that's never been answered to my satisfaction as well is whether that will have any impact on the legal rights that these individuals have under the law of war. They're being held under the law of war and detained in that capacity. They're not being held as an average criminal. And so that's an issue that I have not seen sufficient analysis on whether there'd be any change in what rights they receive as a result of if they were to be transferred to the United States. And I think that's a very important consideration for our defense of the nation and for their status.
As fiscal conservatives, though, what about the incredibly high cost of running Guantanamo? That's something that opponents have brought up.
Well, let's just parse this out a little bit, because what we have seen from this administration is we have seen since May of 2014 a very aggressive transfer of individuals that are being held at Guantanamo. In fact, I believe there have been over 40, and in fact there's some in the queue right now to be transferred. And so they are aggressively transferring individuals, and in my view, many without sufficient security assurances to these other countries, many with prior experiences and intel that we know about their experiences with terrorism that I don't believe they should be transferred, and with open question marks. Now, some of that's in classified, so I can't get fully into what that is. And so if you look at the per prisoner cost, obviously they've been aggressively transferring people out. That said, for all the things, when we think about the responsibility we have to keep the American people safe, I believe that this facility is already built, it's top rate, it is in a very important strategic location, and that it is worth making sure that we don't raise all the questions, including domestic safety. If you look at the GAO report that was done on this, they raise many questions about, okay, what about security? What kind of facility will we have to build, and will that cost? What will kind of constructions cost domestically? And what are the legal rights that these individuals will gain when we think about wanting to make sure that our country remains safe, wanting to make sure that they're treated properly under this legal system?
What about the people who've been cleared for release, but there's nowhere to send them, who've been found that they were just swept out from the street or whatever?
Some of the individuals that have been cleared for release have been cleared for release under this administration, and I would argue it depends on what standards you're applying to clear them from release. And having had briefings on many of these individuals who have been cleared for release, but under prior analysis have been called high value and high risk detainees. I think that just because you're labeled cleared for release, there are a lot of question marks whether some of those individuals should be transferred in light of their connections and history with terrorism.
Last question.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something on that, because there's a bit of irony here. If they've been cleared for release under some dubious conditions, as Senator Ayotte described, and yet no other country will take them,
Right. That tells you something.
And so I think, in my view, I really don't need to say anything more. There's a reason they can't find a place for these folks. Probably more than one reason.
I would just add on to the cost analysis of what it actually costs to house a prisoner at Guantanamo. I think the reality of it is that we have nearly 3,000 of our men and women in the military serving, and their compensation is a part of the package that we figure out how to put a tab on each prisoner. So the fewer the prisoners, the higher the cost, without any question. But those nearly 3,000 soldiers would be transitioned somewhere else. So we're not going to save that money by transitioning them someplace else in the world. The fact of the matter is that part of the cost per prisoner is driven by the number of folks that we have, soldiers. Those soldiers are going to go work at a different location. So the reality of it is the way that we've figured the price is once again, that Washington math that may be questionable.
One more question and we'll go.
Good.
Thank you. Thanks.